Good morning. This is Susan Mark with the Wyoming State Library, and I'd like to welcome you to Bringing Your Museum or Library to Virtual Audiences Part 2. If you missed Part 1, it is up on our YouTube channel, and so you can simply find the Wyoming State Library YouTube channel. So with that, I would like to tell you who our presenters are today and do a little housekeeping. Let me do some housekeeping first. If you have questions during the presentation, put them in the question box and we will get to them at the end. And if you are in a Wyoming museum, we will have an opportunity for you that I'll talk about at the end to get some support for bringing your museum to virtual audiences. These presentations will be available after the program ends. We are recording this and it will be on our YouTube channel after this program ends. We are very fortunate to have two presenters from the Buffalo Bill Center of the West with us today. We have Megan Smith, who has worked at the center for 14 years, and she really has a passion to inspire and empower K-12 audiences. And she's also a published author of children's nonfiction books. And then we also have Carrie Dickerson, who is the museum educator. And Carrie has enjoyed working at the museum for the past 5 years, teaching and interacting with students and families through both virtual and in-person programs. And since I'm sure that you would rather listen to them than to me, I am going to turn it over to them.
All right, there we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. For those of you who joined us on Tuesday, and those of you who didn't, we'll do a really, the quickest recap you can imagine, especially since the webinar on Tuesday was recorded and is on YouTube, so you can kind of backtrack and follow up with that. Anyway, my name is Megan Smith.
I'm Carrie Dickerson.
And we're thrilled to be here with you on this Friday morning in Cody, Wyoming. We're going to go a little fast and furious today. We're going to take a deep dive into some of the things that we talked about on Tuesday. In particular, we're going to focus heavily on our virtual field trip program. So hold on tight. Here we go. For those of you who don't know, Buffalo Bill Center of the West is in Cody, Wyoming, the northwest corner of Wyoming, about an hour outside of Yellowstone. It's an amazing place with 5 museums under one roof. Quite lucky to have it in the town we live in. We have about a town of about 10,000 people, and then in the summer we really rely on tourism, and our population pretty much in a typical year doubles. So summer is kind of our big busy season, and then throughout the winter we really do focus on schools and the K-12 audience. We typically get about 5,000 students on site, although this year I would imagine that it's going to be quite a bit lower. So we've been thinking about how we can adapt some of our existing programs and create some new ones to help to attract that audience, and really also to help them in a way that enriches what students are learning in their classroom. And one way is through our Skype in the Classroom virtual field trip program. We started this in 2013. We have been in all 50 states. We have been in over 50 countries, excuse me, and Skyped with probably 130,000 students or so. Now, when I say Skyped, it's kind of just our verb that we use internally for delivering virtual lessons. They're not always through Skype. However, our partnership in being able to deliver these virtual field trips is through Skype in the Classroom, which is actually owned by Microsoft. So this gives you just a little bit of an idea of the impact that we've had. You can see we've even been to Hawaii and Alaska and down to Mexico, and then we've kind of been throughout the world. How cool would it have been if these were actually trips that we went on, Carrie? But it's neat too, because not only do we get to share this amazing place where we live with students worldwide, but we also get to learn a bit about them. It's really important to us during virtual field trips that they're not only interactive, where the students are at the center of their own learning, But they also get to teach us a bit, and we always make sure that we leave time for students to share a bit about their culture, the habitats that are near where they live, the animals that live there, etc. So we always really try and bring it back to the students so it's real for them. Before we talk about how we develop the virtual field trips, I do want to tell you a bit about the partnership that we have with Skype in the Classroom. When we started 7 years ago, we did partner with Skype in the Classroom immediately. And it's kind of funny how it came about. I was sitting at my computer Googling virtual field trips and just kind of checking out the different things that were out there, and oh, Skype in the Classroom. Well, let me look at that, see what that is. And down at the bottom, there was a button that said, click here to learn more. I clicked that button, and truly the rest is history. And we have developed this incredible partnership. We're one of their top 2 providers of virtual field trips. So we go big, you know. We Skype or deliver virtual field trips to 25,000 students a year. That doesn't mean you need to do that. That's just the way our organization chose to proceed because the impact was so big and we were really able to work with so many different students and teachers. So again, that's our experience. What we want you to take from this is glimmers of how it might work with you, knowing that your scale might be different. So something that's really important to point out about our Skype in the Classroom partnership is that it is free for both partner organizations like ourselves and teachers. So we cannot, our agreement with Skype in the Classroom is that we cannot charge for these field trips, which is great because it makes it equitable and it makes ensures that there's access to everyone who wants to be a part of this. You know, students, you know, we've been on everything from big smart boards in classrooms to kids kind of huddled around one computer watching. They really make it work in different ways. And then with the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, it used to be that we were Skyping into classrooms. With the COVID-19 pandemic, as students joined their teachers in Zoom meetings, we were then invited as co-presenters to join in and chat with those students while they were at home learning. And that was a pretty seamless transition that worked actually quite well. We've never had to spend $1 on marketing for Skype in the Classroom or for our virtual field trips because of this partnership. Skype in the Classroom and Microsoft, they spend so much time and energy on social media and marketing. They are so good to their partners. They make us look great. So that's definitely a big plus as well. Their website, which we're going to kind of get into pretty deeply here in a little bit. We have access, again, free access to the website, their registration and calendar system. We'll show you how that works as well. And because it's owned by Microsoft, there's this huge, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's something called Microsoft Education. And so there's this whole network of teachers that are already part of this system that then are kind of almost tunneled into Skype in the Classroom. So there's this built-in audience that's already there. They also bring years of expertise in helping museums, libraries, teachers, students to provide the best virtual experience and resources. They know what they're doing. They have guides to help partners be better at what they're doing and to also help teachers on their end, because it can be a little intimidating for teachers sometimes to try this out. They have things like Skype live events, which is kind of broadcast. It's broadcast live, however, there's not as much interaction. The regular virtual field trips are live. You're communicating with students back and forth. And then finally, there are some other kind of avenues within social media, within Facebook particularly, and Microsoft Teams, that are private groups where we can communicate with each other and talk about, hey, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. Hey, we're having a technology problem with the website, can you help us with that? So they really built this system around their partners and the teachers and students that they're serving. Okay, so where do you start in developing a virtual field trip? And you know, our approach is really similar to the approach that we took 7 years ago when we developed a new virtual field trip. But there are some things to consider before you even think about what content you want to deliver for your virtual field trip. And I've listed some of these here, kind of technology and other considerations. don't let the technology scare you, because really you could get away with just having a computer with a webcam or a tablet. Any kind of tablet. It can be Samsung, it can be, you know, a Surface, we use iPads. That just happens to work for us. Those are particularly nice if you want to roam around your museum and kind of get up close to the exhibits that you have there. That's not really, we did do that. That probably won't be possible for us this year, as all employees are required to wear masks because of COVID. So that kind of will take away the interactivity for us. So we'll be in our lab for most of our lessons, at least for now. So tablet, you can use a laptop, a desktop. We happen to have a smart board that we're using today. And it was something that the museum already had when we started 7 years ago. So we were like, oh, this is perfect. We can start on that. The nice thing about the smart board is that it's got a huge screen, so that when we are talking with students, it's like we're right there with them. It's like we're right in the classroom. Webcam, and we'll show you a couple of these things kind of at the end when we do a Q&A. Webcam, you don't need to spend much, 20, 30 bucks on a webcam and you are good to go. If you're using a laptop, you've got one built in. A dedicated or quiet space if you're not in the gallery. Right now, we just finished construction on our innovation lab, which is kind of doubling as a Skype and a STEM lab. Prior to that, we just found kind of a quiet corner where, yes, visitors would interact with us when we were doing lessons, but it still worked really well. But having that dedicated space really helps. You've got your hands-on objects there. You've got kind of everything set up and ready to go. Reliable internet, pretty important. Our smart board, we actually hardwire it, so we don't have to worry about any wireless issues. When we first started, and especially when we were going into our Draper Natural History Museum to show students the ecosystem and animals that live there, the wireless was not great. So we had to boost that wireless, and it did not cost much to put those boosters in, and that helped incredibly. So, you know, test all that ahead of time. One thing we did, and I'm so glad we did, is we brought our IT department in day one. So we had buy-in from them, because you know what? Well, we are good. We've done this a long time. We're good at troubleshooting technology. Sometimes we have no idea what's going on. And our IT department is really helpful in helping us to figure that out, especially if we're in between virtual field trips. So get buy-in from your IT department because they can be your best champion. Think about access to digital objects, especially if you're not going to be able to go into your galleries. Think about your digital collection and how you can use that. And I'll show you in a couple of minutes some different ways we do that. Then some optional technology, 360 camera. We have a great little one that's tiny, it can fit in my pocket, that takes great photos. I don't have to then go into Photoshop and stitch them together. It does it for me. Tripods are helpful. Smartboard or a large screen that you can hook to a computer is helpful, but again, it's optional. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when thinking about your virtual field trip is look at what you already do and have on site. Okay, it's really important. So we're actually going through this process right now. We're developing another virtual field trip called Plains Indian Cultures Yesterday and Today. With the new Indian Education for All standards in Wyoming, we want to engage more Wyoming students and teachers on with our virtual field trips. We actually don't get a lot of Wyoming students and teachers. That's okay, because in the past they come to visit us, but now we feel like we can really help them. So Plains Indian Cultures Yesterday and Today is an existed guided tour, and we sat down as a team and thought about, okay, what parts of this tour are going to work for the new standards, which parts of this tour will work well and kind of adapt or evolve nicely to our virtual field trip. So here are some of the questions, and we met 2 or 3 weeks ago, and these were the questions that we brought to the table. Will you be delivering the virtual field trip within a gallery or in a dedicated quiet space? Because that's going to change the technology you're going to use and also the resources you'll need during it. If you are just in your gallery with an iPad, that's all you need other than your content or in your script. If you're in a quiet, dedicated space, okay, how am I going to communicate? How will we communicate our story that we want to tell if we're not in the gallery? What works well on existing program? We talked about that. What are the most important concepts from that existing material? So something to think about is, typically a school group arrives, they get off the bus, they go to the bathroom, we go on the tour. Tour lasts approximately 1 hour. It's really hard to keep students' attention for 1 hour virtually. It's too long, and you know what? Teachers don't have the time in their classroom to dedicate that. So we plan for most field trips lasting between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on the grade level. There's still so much you can cover, and it's kind of interesting because it makes you step back and realize in that 1 hour tour, well, maybe we don't need to cover that anyway. So it's kind of paring that down. Don't forget the standards and objectives that you need to meet, because that's what's going to sell it to the teachers, who then potentially need to sell it to their principals and their co-teachers, that this is something that will help us. And then as you go along, what resources do you need to gather, especially if not conducting the experience as a walking tour? Okay, so let's start with using your collection, all right? Whether it's your library or you're at your museum. Think about the amazing collection that really makes your institution what it is. So one of the things we did is talked about some of our favorite objects when we go on that tour that we use to tell the story of Plains Indian cultures from yesterday and today. It's very important for us when we approach Plains Indian culture that we do talk about the today, because it is such a vibrant culture that is alive today. Their cultures have not died. That's why you see that awesome trucker cap that's been beaded, and our winter count, and then just a beautiful dress from reservation area. So that's just an example of 3 objects that if we were in the gallery giving the tour, we would stop and look at. But if we're not in the gallery, we're going to need some images like these to help to tell the story. So think about how you can use those existing digital objects. That's because I moved that again. Okay. So Carrie yesterday showed you a little bit how we've been using 360 photography. Just a couple weeks ago, Carrie and I got in here nice and early before we opened to get some 360 photography of our Plains Indian Museum so that we could think about showing those objects in a way that's a little bit more engaging and immersive for students. So this is, I think I teased you on Tuesday with this to still image, but this is a 360 photo of our Paul Dyke Gallery at the bottom of our Plains Indian Museum. Okay, you get an idea of some of the objects here. It actually has some of my just favorite objects in the entire museum. These are some shields here. We can zoom in a little bit. We can start to see that the shields have been painted and that there are animals on the shields. So we can really start to even think about Plains Indian culture as art. I do want to zoom back this way a little bit, though, to the feather bonnet headdress and see how we can zoom in. Look at those feathers. Look at the trade cloth that was used. So lots of different ways that we can use the actual objects. And it photographed really nicely. I'm going to show you another one. I'm not even, whoops, hold on a second here. There we go. Okay, let me show you another one that we took, because it isn't just about these particular objects, but for us, it's really important in virtual field trips and really in everything that we do that we talk about the story that's behind the objects, right, to make it really relevant to students' lives. So this is the inside of our reservation house. And the reservation house in itself has a really incredible story that we like to share with students. But you can really see how easily we can navigate around the museum, look at the floor, look at the ceiling, look into the other room, zoom in a little bit. And with here, our story that we're talking about is that, you know, the two cultures, the Plains Indian culture and the Euro-American culture, and that really helps to bring it alive. On the guided tour, we typically bring students in here and we talk about it. Well, we just brought them in here using the 360 photo as well. Come on back. Sorry, there's a couple little clicks each time we go back and forth. So there's other resources that you have too. Okay, you have your objects, you have images of objects, whether they're still or 360. Think about other things your museum has developed over time that might help during the virtual field trip, especially if you're not, again, not in the gallery. This is a Plains Indian map that we created, 3 or 4 years ago that shows how the Plains Indian people's lands have changed over time, from no boundaries all the way to present, where they're, you know, live on reservations and their land has changed so much. So, you know, kind of dive into your website, look around, see what's there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you don't end up using these resources during your tour, they then make really great resources that teachers can use in the classroom before or after your virtual field trip as well. Okay, so a really important thing is, you know, making your educators feel empowered, but also giving them all the tools that they need to be successful in delivering their virtual field trip. So one of the ways we do that is in developing a script. However, when I say script, that term is used very loosely because it's a very flexible script. It's a long script too. It's content you'd never cover in 30 minutes to 45 minutes. But what it does is it gives educators, especially new educators, the content that they need to know and guidance in how they might present it. But it's really important to us that our educators make these virtual field trips their own. You know, we do say, here's certain content you do have to cover, because remember, we do need to meet those standards and objectives, but you can do it in any number of ways. So this is more of a guideline for them. So important things to remember as you get started, though, because this really helps to create a cohesive virtual field trip, is remember your theme, your lesson description, the materials that you'll need, your objectives. You carry this through the development of your virtual field trip, and it really helps to make sure that you kind of stay on target with the purpose of it. And this just gives you an idea of what a page from the script would look like. When I write these, I like to give ideas to educators of ways that they can explain content, ask kids questions, engage kids, brainstorm with the kids. And you'll notice there's also headings on. For this particular one, since we're developing this in this crazy world that we live in right now, we kind of have it set up both ways. We have it set up so we could potentially go into the gallery when the museum is closed, because ideally that is what we want to do. We want to be in the gallery and make the students feel like they're really on that virtual field trip. Or if we're in our studio, I'm also providing how they would do that, whether it's a screen share of a 360 photo or a video or something like that. So I try to be as specific as I can with this, but knowing that it's not going to be memorized and it shouldn't be memorized. You know, I often write these from the way I would say it. Carrie, she takes a look at it. Do you want to say what you do?
Yeah, I take a look at it, learn how to present it, and then I go back in and rewrite it with things that I want to pull out of each of those sections and have it written in my voice.
Exactly.
So that it sounds like me.
Right, exactly. Okay. As you're working, again, think about those resources that you already have. These are some teacher guides that we use for our Plains Indian Culture Tour on site. They're really easily adapted for the virtual field trip as well. I mentioned our 360 adventure a little bit. I'm going to click just to show you again. Last time, I can't stress enough how cool Microsoft Sway is. It's pretty easy to use. There's a learning curve just like there is with anything else. But what I love about it is it kind of scrolls and almost like a website without it being exactly a website. It's a shareable link that you can use that anybody can view. You can embed videos, you can embed 360 photos, you can embed content, you can embed fun ways to engage students. So what I want to do just really quickly, because our time is going way too fast, is I want to show you kind of just the back end of what that looks like. You know, you need to kind of fiddle around with it. So on one side, I pulled kind of at the end of a curriculum that I developed through Microsoft Say. This is our 360 Yellowstone Alpine Adventure. This is the assessment at the end, right? Because assessment we know is really important, and they didn't want it to be multiple choice test questions. So we have some existing videos that I used, and then the students had to look at those videos and think about some questions afterwards. And in the live version, they tap on the bear, and there's some cards they rotate through that ask questions reflecting on what they learned about. And then you can see a couple boxes that are overlapping. This is just what it looks like on the building end. You can build headings, you've got your text cards, you can group together videos, which is what I did. I embedded those videos, and I chose what I wanted that layout to look like. And then every time my bear shows up, I created another group called a stack. And all I had to do, since we work on Microsoft, is literally open up my web cloud version of it, pull in my bear, and pull in the text card. Whoops. The text cards that I wanted. I was thinking that I was online there for a second. Sorry about that. So if you have a Microsoft account, go into Skype, play around with it. It is so much fun. And students and teachers do not need a Microsoft account to view and interact with the final product. And I guess that's what I love about it the most, is that it's interactive, it's dynamic, it's not at all static. All right.
Okay, so I'm just going to switch up a little bit. Instead of building the lessons, I'm just going to show you what Skype in the classroom looks like, and quickly talk about the different parts of it that we use to build those virtual field trips and make them available for teachers to register, see what we offer through Skype in the Classroom. So this is just the Skype in the Classroom landing page. You can see up at the top corner there's a sign in. Even when you're first starting, you sign in, you set up an account, then you get this thing that says My Organization once you're signed in. Now we also already show all of our lessons, but when you're first building it, your organization, you enter the information you want anyone to see when they look at your organization's page. Even without looking at the lessons, they can look up Buffalo Bill Center of the West and see what we offer. This is where you enter that information, and you also have a guest speaker associated with your organization. Now, since we have multiple lessons, have guest speakers for each of our lessons. However, the guest speaker for our main page is where we can edit any of that information we want people to know about the center. It's also where we can add a speaker session or add a virtual field trip. So if we select virtual field trip from here, we can add a new virtual field trip, just like Megan has been talking about the culture of Plains Indians. We can add that in here. Now this is an example of an existing one, but let's pretend that we were starting new. We would add our animal adaptations title. You have the organization associated with it, so everything links appropriately in the Skype in the Classroom website. So there's a lot of options for selecting who that presenter or guest speaker is. You can add subjects so that when a teacher searches for animals, they're going to land with this virtual field trip as one of their possible things to select about animals. You can describe the virtual field trip, any of the learning objectives. And one thing I want to point out at the very top of this section of editing is that we have selected 60 minutes for the duration of our session. And as Megan mentioned, we don't go 60 minutes on a virtual field trip, rarely if ever, and that's usually because there's a lot of questions or there's been tech issues. What we've found though, since our lessons are 35 to 45 minutes total, it made sense for us to have time to allow for any problems, whether that's tech issues, teachers not being able to arrive on time because something happened at school, or because some students get really excited, we need that extra time to answer their questions or allow them to share. So we set hours for 60 minutes, even though the lesson itself may only last 35. And by doing that, we can also then adjust for the teacher. If they say we only have 25 minutes, great. We can adjust our lesson to that 25 minutes, but we've allowed the time. And so there's little bits that you can add to build that virtual field trip so that when somebody wants to look at your trip, you have all the information. And then once you get all your information in, Skype in the Classroom also has this built-in calendar that allows you to put out to everyone what your organization's availability is. So you can see our availability for next week. This availability shows that we are available from basically 7 on here to 1 or 2, but how we are available all day on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. But we know that we don't have presenters available on that Wednesday and Thursday. And before I enter all of our availability, I also check our calendars. And this is for a couple weeks from now that shows you where some lessons are. But before I enter the availability for this particular week in that Skype in the Classroom, I check each of our presenters' availability and make sure that we have 1, if not 2 of us available for any time slot that I add to that calendar. Because I don't want to put a time on that calendar and then a teacher select it and not have it actually available. So we use our Outlook calendars. You don't have to use Outlook. You can use any platform's calendar. If you only have one presenter, you can really, if you are the only presenter, you know what your calendar is. You don't even have to use a personal calendar. You can use this built-in Skype in the Classroom calendar to manage your time. So once all of that's in there, you now have your partner page that we looked at kind of right at the beginning of my section, and we have each of our virtual field trips listed on there. You can also edit those virtual field trips from in here. If our animal adaptations we just entered was in here, I could click on it and go back to that same editing page and update all of that information, including the calendars as well. The other really neat thing is that now it's in this drop-down menu at the very top. So you have our My Organization, but you also have the organization calendar, and it shows each of those individual lessons calendars. If you only have one lesson, it'll show one lesson, and you can also use that little button to the right of Content Partner that says My Calendar, and it'll show you just the information for that one lesson. So when I add any information, I can also, or any time slots available, I can also just go directly to the calendar for that particular lesson. If nothing has changed for one of the other lessons, I don't need to go in and edit the entire lesson. I can select that calendar, that animal adaptations, add one time slot because I know that 8 o'clock is available next week. You can add 1 slot, you can add 2 slots, you can add recurring a number of slots throughout several months, the way it's set up here in the Skype in the Classroom calendar system. This is what we receive via email, just a notice that somebody has registered for our lesson. And that's really nice to get an email because I may not have logged into Skype in Classroom for the day since we use our regular calendars as well. And our email I open every day. So I've logged into email, but not necessarily Skype in the Classroom. If I see this email, I know I need to go check out that animal adaptations lesson and see who's registered and see if I can accept it. So when I log in now, I notice that there are 2 registrations, and I can see next to that animal adaptations lesson that there is 1 pending registration. When I click on that calendar, even though it says only 1 pending request and there's 3 yellow highlights, just by knowing that there's 1, I know that it's 1 teacher that signed up for 3 top time slots that's possible for that teacher. So again, I go to our calendar, see what educator we have on our side available. I select the best time to approve. I approve that lesson. If for some reason something has changed on our calendar and I haven't updated in time, I can also decline that request. When I approve or decline, it prompts a page that I can message the teacher, send them our email address, give them any contact information or details that we need to know. When I check that calendar out again, you'll notice that it's kind of hidden, but selected in green back there. That is an accepted request out of the 3 that I chose. I see who I've accepted the request for. I can see that if I need to go back in and cancel it, I can. If I want to join the session directly from this calendar, I can as well. And that little join the session button is pretty fantastic for being able to share that connectivity with the teacher without even having to have email communication. If I click that join session, it takes me directly via link to Skype, and I am in a space, a meeting space via Skype with that teacher, which is great for in the classroom. We've talked about using platforms other than Skype. That's great too. But if you're using Skype, this join session link right off the calendar is pretty fantastic. You also get that join the call, just same as that join session link, directly emailed to you from Skype in the classroom. So you have a couple options for joining that call. Now, I mentioned that my calendar, since we have multiple lessons, we can see all of those lessons on one calendar here for us. We have both the Stories of Culture of Plains Indians on that Monday the 24th and an Animal Adaptations lesson on the 28th. If we went into each individual calendar, we only see the calendar for that particular lesson. Now, I can't update any of that availability information here, but I still can click on one of those and join from the main organization calendar as well. This is what a teacher sees. So when a teacher or any educator, we keep saying teacher, but I want to point out that it's homeschool parents or teachers, it's library professionals that set up a program for a public from their library, it's senior centers as well. Anybody who has set up themselves as an educator can log in. Once they log in, they can search for animals. As I mentioned, our animal adaptations lesson comes up. They can request that session after viewing all the details of our animal adaptation lesson. And then they basically see our availability just like I showed you how I had it entered from our side. The teacher sees that, can select a couple times that they would like, and then we'll also receive the email saying your lesson has been confirmed. You have these pending before it's confirmed. You can join. So that's kind of how Skype in the classroom works. I do want to point out again, as Megan mentioned, that we will use any platform. Skype in the classroom is a great meeting site for registering, getting information, and Skype itself is fantastic for when we are in the class, the teacher and the students are in the classroom together. It's a really great two-way communication between us and them, a lot of great ability for screen sharing and interacting. When kids are at home, Skype is not as easy because everybody's joining from different views and you can't see everybody or interact with each other as well. So we use Teams, or if the school is using Zoom or Google Meet, we can join through links set from the teacher for their Zoom class lesson, through their Google Meet lesson, and they work just as well as Skype and even better from home. So it gives you an idea that you can be really fluid between any of those platforms pretty easily. They all work generally the same way.
And something to point out, Carrie and I and some of our educators were talking about this as well. You know, there's paid subscriptions to some of these, and then you get longer time that you can have with kids if you exceed the 45 minutes. So we talked about, well, should we, subscribe to any of that? We decided no, because more often than not, the teachers are the one creating that safe private link for us to join. So you don't even have to usually invest in a subscription.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Since I do the registrations and communicate with the teachers before the lesson, I kind of emphasize that. Unless they ask us to create a link or call them, I request that they do it for those privacy settings that they have set for their district.
Right.
And then right before anybody goes out to a lesson or learns about the lessons for the first time, they of course need to know how to log into Skype. They need to log into our smartboard, or how they're going to access any of our screen share PowerPoints or anything. So we have a cheat sheet for each educator. In case you haven't done a lesson for a while, or in case you're new, here's kind of the information we have that anybody can take a look at right before the lesson, carry out with them if they're coming out to our dedicated space, but have that available just to be ready in case you forget something.
Okay. How's everybody feeling? You're a little overwhelmed? Sorry, we really did want to give you a nuts and bolts bit of it, kind of from start to finish. Okay, you've developed your lesson. You've gotten your resources. It's something that Carrie didn't mention, that on that Skype in the Classroom website, you can link back to your own organization's page, website, but you can also put all those resources that you developed for students, whether it's pre-activity or whatever it is. There's links that you can put in there. You can embed videos, photos, so you really can build this really nice experience that goes beyond that virtual field trip. Okay, you've done all that. Take a deep breath, and it's time for your first virtual field trip. Here's just a couple things that we've learned through the years that help us, and we still do some of this. You know, for your first, you do a test call with the teacher prior to your field trip. Lots of teachers will ask to do that, and just find a time that works for both of you to do a test call. That cheat sheet with passwords and directions for the platforms, we actually put together a binder with all the scripts, and that cheat sheet is at the beginning and is super helpful. During delivery, don't forget to look at your camera. You know, don't worry about looking at yourself. You're going to forget about that after a while. Make sure you're looking at the camera. It's also really helpful to have whatever calendar you're using or however you're getting that meeting link just open and ready to go on your device so you can click and be ready to roll. This is a big one, and we have to stress this a lot with our educators. Be patient. There are so many factors happening in the classroom that we don't know about. Anything from kind of technology issues to a fire drill to, oh my gosh, I forgot they had art and I scheduled this at the same time. This stuff happens. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And that, again, gets at that 10 to 15-minute cushion we were talking about. You know, you've got your 30 to 45-minute lesson. You know, we don't call a lesson if nobody showed until about 10 or 15 minutes after that start time, knowing there may be issues on their end and they can't get to us to let us know. And here's just a little helpful hint. If something is going really strange and you can't troubleshoot it, it's very often a firewall on the school's end that's been built in. Now, if a teacher can get to their IT for their district quickly to lift that firewall, great. More oftentimes, you have to reschedule, and they need to talk to their IT department to lift that firewall.
I just want to point out one other thing with that in particular. Sometimes whatever platform you're working with is the cause of the problem.
Yes.
So that might be there might be a firewall for Skype, but not for Google.
Yes.
So I will often say, well, do you have a Google account of any kind? We can try meeting over Google Meet or Hangouts. Or is there something else that your school might use? So just don't forget about some of those other things as well.
Absolutely. So with that, we can answer some questions, but please do contact us if you have any questions or concerns. If you want us to walk through any of this with you, we're happy to go even deeper with you to help you and your museum or library get started. That's what we are here for. All right, so we're going to come on back. I think we're close to the end of our time, but maybe we can go over a little bit. I don't know. I'm going to leave that to Susan. So with that, if you have any questions, or maybe you've been putting questions in the Q&A section, we're happy to answer them.
Yes, there are quite a few questions, actually. Will you be able to make the slides available? If you send those to me, I can post them.
Yes, definitely. We can do that however you like. So there's a couple ways. The YouTube video will have those slides, but it's quick. We can create a shareable folder and send that link, I guess, to you, Susan, and then people will have access to those slides whenever they like, because I know we went through them really quickly.
Okay. With the international Skype in the Classroom, do you work with other languages?
Ooh, good question.
Well, Skype itself has a built-in translator. So when you're using Skype, you can actually have it translate them to you and you to them just by selecting the correct languages. I will say, because we don't have anyone that is bilingual, we don't offer the lessons that way. We do a lot of international with classes that already speak English, and a lot of times they may not even be studying plains Indian culture or tractors or animals. They're doing English. So they choose something that seems interesting to them, and it's a way for the students to practice their English as well.
And it's a way for us to remember to speak slowly, which neither of us.
Okay. Our museum sometimes has poor internet connectivity due to our location. How feasible is live streaming under those circumstances?
Could you repeat the beginning of that again? I'm sorry.
Sorry, the museum sometimes has poor internet connectivity. How feasible is live streaming?
I think it would be a challenge.
I think so too.
Especially if there's a lot of pausing in between, just because we see that sometimes, especially with schools, when they're are eating up the bandwidth because there's multiple classrooms using some kind of online platform for whatever. And it makes it hard for the students to really get what you're talking about. I do think that it would be a little bit of a challenge with connectivity.
Look into those boosters.
Yeah.
Because they are really not, they're not cost prohibitive at all to boost that wireless. That helps incredibly. Another good point is sometimes schools, like Carrie said, the bandwidth is being used or they don't have good connectivity in their classroom. And so often what we'll do if that happens is we'll have them turn off their camera. What did you? Then you can't see the kids. But you know what? We've been doing this for a while. We're so used to pretending we can see the kids. Just like we did today. We pretended we could see all of you at home or in your offices. So know that happens. Sometimes the teacher will have the camera and it's like looking up at the ceiling. You're like, great, I'm going to see their ceiling tiles the whole time. And you roll with it. But bandwidth, it can be tricky.
And
it has gotten better though. It's gotten better.
But yeah, Megan saying turning off the camera does help with that. If you do have kind of poor internet connection, at least you won't have their video coming in while you're trying to share yours.
And sometimes switching platforms.
That's true.
Yep. Yeah. So those are those little things. Please do contact us. Those are those lessons we've learned the hard way. I shouldn't even say the hard way, just trial and error that we're happy to share with you.
Says, I'm sure there are technology grants out there to support virtual learning. What particular grant did you receive to jumpstart and sustain Skype in the classroom?
So we are supported by a ranch here in town, actually, or outside of town here, who just really believes in education and technology in education. So we actually didn't have to go through that granting process. We were connected with these individuals. The individuals like to remain anonymous, so I'm not going to say who, through a board member, and we've just really developed that relationship. But, Spectrum, I believe, especially if Spectrum is in your community, they do have grants for technology and education, so look into stuff like that. I think the same with Verizon. Look at some of those technology companies, and especially their foundations. Look at the foundations that they have.
We have a question. The exhibits in my museum change every 3 months, leaving her very short time to develop and offer virtual tours. Thought about using some of the permanent collection pieces. In addition, do you have other suggestions?
That's a really good question. So depending on what kind of museum it is, like if it's an art museum and the art is changing, because the art rotates out of our museum too, if you develop a script, and we're actually doing this now, we're developing an art virtual field trip that is kind of the basics of art, line, color, reacting to art. You can do that with any of the pieces of art. And we intentionally are doing it that way, and we expect that educators actually may choose different pieces of art that they use for that virtual field trip. So I think that art lends itself really well to that. As far as special exhibits that we have here, we have avoided developing virtual field trips for them because of the time and energy that we'd have to put into it for a short amount of time.
But just thinking about in our natural history museum, say something was taken out of our alpine area and switched with something else. If you have kind of the general lesson goals that you're trying to meet for that particular one, it's adaptations. As long as you can kind of have a generic idea of what it is that you want to get across, you might be able to interchange what you're using as that exhibit item, because kind of goes along with us developing our own kind of flow with each of those lessons. I probably use different animals than Megan does some of the time, you know, as long as I hit those particular lesson goals. So that might be a way to look at it. Maybe think about
Good
some
point.
things that are a little more generic in what you're trying to go for, as opposed to just that specific item or
And that's
collection
very
piece.
much what we're doing with our museum. And we could do that in Plains Indian Museum of Culture, because culture is in every single object, right? Their culture is is reflected in every single object. So yeah, don't let it scare you. Think of different ways that you can be creative. You know, our special exhibits are so special too that sometimes they're not necessarily relevant to what kids are doing. It does work well in the Natural History Museum though. Yeah.
So how often do you find participants in the galleries impact the virtual field trip?
How many, say that one more time?
How often do you find participants in the galleries impact the virtual field trip? I think we had the same question Tuesday.
Yeah, we did. Go ahead.
Well, it actually doesn't generally impact us at all, other than maybe having to maneuver a little differently around, or maybe go out a little bit out of order. But for the most part, people follow us around if we're actually in the gallery doing a tour. They want to be on the tour with us. So they follow us around, listen. Oftentimes we get comments at the end if they followed us for a while. Oh, that was great. It was so neat to see you interacting with the classroom. I know a friend that's a teacher. Can you tell me more about this? And the same, even when we're here in our enclosed space now, people will stand outside of our glass doors and observe, and some of them even wait as I walk out. That was really neat. What were you doing? So in general, it's just more education here for the people visiting as well.
And something that's kind of fun too is during field trip season, it's like, okay, there's 100 kids in, you know, the Draper Natural History Museum, and we're doing a virtual field trip. And what's kind of neat is the kids are seeing each other even as they're walking by, and it just connects those kids in a really quick, neat way. So we just don't let this stuff bother us. It doesn't bother the visitors, and every once in a while we might have a visitor that's upset by it, but really I think it's pretty cool.
What program did you use to create your assessments?
So there's a couple ways that you can do assessments. So we you know, we use that sway a lot. I have some other sways, Microsoft sways, that I didn't show you for each of our lessons. There's also something called Flipgrid that we've been using. Flipgrid it can be on a desktop that students use, or it can be an app, and teachers use it all the time for assessment. It's really neat because what happens is that teachers or us can present whatever assessment it is, whatever question it is, whatever we want them to get from it. And kids then go in and record their responses, so it becomes this kind of video thing. So sometimes teachers will share that with us as well. It's a really nice way for us to kind of see, like, okay, oh, did we say that? I don't think we said that, but that's what they heard. So it reminds us to keep in check as well. We do have evaluations, online evaluations, as far as assessment from teachers, which get filled out sometimes. I would say more often than not, Carrie gets an email with a quick assessment of, hey, I assessed the kids this way, and this is the feedback I got, and this is how it met our classroom needs. And I actually have a document that's like 30 pages long, or I just copy and paste all those things that we get. So we do assessment of, you know, assessing us and assessing kids differently.
We have 4 more questions. Is that okay by you guys?
Absolutely, if it's okay with you.
It's okay with me. We can run a little long if we need to. How many educators do you have to reach 25,000 students a year?
Yeah. So we are doing up to 8 lessons a day, sometimes 10. Those are the days that Carrie's got a little crazy on that day. We're like, no more. We have, I'll let you answer that.
Well,
scheduling.
There's really 4 of us that are doing most of the lessons. We do have 1 or 2 others as part of our education department that are happy to fill in. But 2 of us are part-time. I am one of the part-time educators that does a couple lessons early or late in the day and does the registrations. We have another part-time educator for around 4 hours a day. And then Megan and one other staff member generally do lessons. So we do have 4 people available, though it's not 4 full-time. It's covered covered through part-time basis, basically even through our full-time people. They're available for a couple lessons a day.
Yep. And something else that Carrie didn't mention that is really helpful because there's so many of us is that she puts a backup on any lesson. So if anybody were to get sick, that second person would be backup for it. So that's been really helpful as well. But again, don't forget, we went really big. You don't need nearly as many educators depending on the scale that you want to go on.
I mean, we even double up some days. Like when we have 2 people or 3 people available, I might put Megan on as backup to 2 different other presenters just because, well, we have the availability. They don't have something else to do. They might as well teach a lesson if somebody has requested it.
Now, one thing I will say is because we reach so many students per year, having Carrie being that one dedicated person who does all the registration and all the calendar is really, really helpful. I mean, she's kind of our clearinghouse. She's the one talking to the teachers. She's the one who makes sure we have all the information we need so that we can get going in the morning. And I would say most popular times to Skype are like between 8 and noon because then you're hitting, you're hitting the East Coast. And then as you get to 9 o'clock our time, you're starting to get the West Coast. So.
Have you had any problems transferring lesson plans between Skype and the classroom and other platforms?
I don't think so at all.
No, definitely. I mean, we tweak them here and there. We try to make sure that we see what other educators are doing because they might bring a different perspective we hadn't thought of. Think, oh, that'd be a neat, like when Carrie was recording a part of her animal adaptation lesson for the last webinar that we did on Tuesday. I forget what it was, but I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I never thought of that. So it's more tweaking, but we've been really thoughtful in the virtual field trips that we are converting. And if we kind of start thinking about one and we see it's not going to work, I don't want to say we ditch it. We put it aside. Maybe something will work later and we think of something else. But no, it's really...
Well, and as far as the platform, if you're thinking about changing from Skype to Google as well, it really is pretty seamless. We tested out the first time we use it just to make sure it actually shows up like we're sharing the PowerPoint now. But I don't think we've ever really had any problem once we figured out where that icon is to share the screen or flip the camera. Once you figure out where it is on that particular program or platform, it's seamless.
Some of them are more intuitive than others, but yeah, you figure it out.
Yeah. What are you using to host the 360 photos?
Ooh, really good question. Okay, so this is the 360 camera that we used. It's called a Ricoh Theta 5. It's under $400. Again, we do have funding to support our program so that we could purchase this. I did a lot of research when we bought it because, museums have a lot of low light, so you want something that's going to get the images well. And then, of course, the tricky thing is you've got these really cool images. How can people view them? We use Google Photos. So we have just an account for Center of the West Education. And we host them on there because it's one of the only platforms that you can view 360 photos in that 360 mode. So we're linking, when I pulled up those 360 photos, they were linked to those specific photos. It works really, really well. So that, again, took a little bit of kind of searching to figure out, but it works real seamlessly during the lessons. We had to do that this fall, so.
Yeah. Do you incorporate independent learning tools, things like pre-recorded videos that don't require live streaming along with your live stream lessons? And if so, how do you balance the content between the two styles?
That's a great question. So, yeah, we try not to repeat content because unless it's kind of an overview. We do create kind of some small quick videos or content, and we think about what it is we haven't covered because there's a lot you can't cover in that 30 to 45 minutes. And a lot of that stuff, again, we've used because we've already had it. We had an intern, oh gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago who helped to create some of those videos for us that we use. They're already out of date and we need to do something with them. But it's just being really thoughtful and working together as a group to think about what it is we're not covering that can take this the next step further. Sometimes it's content, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's having kids think about, so one of the things we do is we ask teachers to have their students research where they live and the habitats near them and create a project with an animal in that habitat, and they share it with us. So sometimes it's just thinking about what are those activities, what are those follow-up or pre-lesson activities that are going to enrich this experience. Because, yeah, sometimes these will be one-offs in the classroom. We can't avoid that, but we'd rather they weren't. We'd rather that there was a curriculum or something that builds on it. And it takes time. You know, when we first started, we did not have the resources we have now. We had the lessons. And we built them slowly over those 7 years so we could be thoughtful about it.
And very last question, do you ever plan out lessons with teachers in advance?
Sure, if we get special requests, we do that. We did that actually this spring. We did that quite a bit with our local schools that had field trips scheduled and they couldn't come. So I reached out to them and said, hey, let's figure out how we can do this virtually. So we adapted lots of different virtual or on-site experiences and field trips this spring really quickly so that we could still bring the museum. So yeah, we're happy to tailor. Yeah, if we
Give
can.
them the time.
Yeah, give them the time.
Can't tell us like the day before.
Give them the time. And also, you know, if they say, can you do something on the Gold Rush? It's like, no, not really, no. You know, so it needs to also pertain to our museum as well. So, or, hey, can you make sure during your Plains Indian that you really focus, we're learning about this Plains Indian tribe. Can you make sure you show some objects? Yes, we can do that. But time, yes, because once we get going, sometimes we have to say, no, not the day before. Sorry.
Well, we might have to add some images to what we're going to do, or add some details to what our own personal script, or at least some notes. And because somebody might be sick, we need to be able to get that to the alternate person as well, just in case.
But we do what we can, definitely. I mean, I'm a sucker. I have a hard time saying no.
And it's kind of fun to, we had a request for specifically wolves of Yellowstone in the spring, and we didn't actually get to it, but that particular group of kids had already done our animal adaptations, but wanted to learn a little bit more about wolves. So that was great. We could focus a little bit on wolves, and everybody got to learn a little bit more. So,
Thank you, Megan and Carrie. This was really informative. People are saying thank you for this interesting presentation. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my screen.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Susan, for hosting us.
And again, I'm Susan Mark. I'm the Outreach Librarian at the Wyoming State Library. This webinar has been recorded, and it will be posted to the Wyoming State Library YouTube channel as soon as it is available. If you are in a Wyoming museum, contact me, because there is an opportunity for up to $250 in support for equipment, software, or services that you might need for virtual programming. So with that, we are going to conclude, and thank you all for attending.